here we are. This is S.x Love Psych3delics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat, bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more.
For people who are in a relationship, or I guess this could also be entering into a relationship too, I want to talk about how we can create these unconscious power dynamics between us. Because as you're describing, these thoughts and these beliefs about ourselves disempower our own selves. So then how do we get into a configuration with another person or persons that ends up creating either us having more power or they having more power? How do we identify that? What do we do with that?
Yeah, it's a really great question. The more I work with human beings around relationship and personal growth work, the more I feel that it is just part of the human experience to feel simultaneously, I am too much and also I am not enough, right? And different
Yeah.
permutations, different colors, different versions, it just shows up. And so one of the ways that that can often impact the way that people choose partners is I'm going to choose a person who activates that really uncomfortable sensation of either I am too much or I am not enough or some combination of the two. I'm going to choose a person who activates that uncomfortable feeling as little as possible. And that's totally reasonable and understandable to choose that path. What I see oftentimes is that how that ends up is I'm choosing a relationship where I feel really safe because I don't need to worry about the person really calling me out on stuff. I don't maybe need to worry about that person leaving, or I feel like, I have some sort of, I have the upper hand with the power here. And what I often find with my clients is that they're end up serial monogamous that way of, okay, I'm going to end up in a series of, 3 months to a year and a half relationships that start out great, but ultimately I end up feeling kind of bored or feel like there's something more, or feel like there's something missing. And then they maybe are finally ready to meet someone who is truly meeting them on an energetic level. So it doesn't necessarily mean this person has, is the same as you, but you have elements that you're really strong in. They have elements that they're really strong in. Some of those are overlapping. Some of those are completely different. But you're not so sure that this person's not going to leave you, right? You're not so sure that you have the upper hand. In fact, you don't. And that can be immensely, immensely confronting. And what I find is that a lot of the couples I watch who are meeting each other energetically can have a tendency to get caught in this power struggle dynamic. So one person is trying to take the power, the other person's also trying to take the power, and they're sort of in this locked battle that's draining a lot of energy from the relational system. And there's a concept in our society where it's desirable to be the leader. It's desirable to be the most powerful, right? Yeah. And there's an egoic desire to have that role and feel the safety of that role. Totally understandable. Humans like to have control. I like to have control. I get it. And in some of the most refined teams, such as Navy SEAL team, they have a concept called dynamic subordination. And what this is, it's an acknowledgement that whoever the leader is, that person needs to expend the largest amount of energy. So it's not necessarily the most desirable role. And so one person will step forward as the leader. Whoever knows the right thing to do in that moment will step forward as the leader. And the rest of the team will immediately fall in line behind them. And so that allows the team to resource its energy as efficiently as possible. And they switch, they alternate. So someone knows the next thing that needs to happen, they step forward as leader, everyone falls in line behind them without any resistance. It's the resistance and the friction to the leadership that creates the energetic drain from the system. Wow. So the way that I work with couples on this is really tuning into, okay, what do you need to trust each other? For one person to step into a leadership role and the other person to step fully into the receiving role of that experience. Let's say you're cooking dinner together, right? One person might be chopping onions, the other person might be saying, oh no, you need to chop them this way, or oh no, don't put them in yet. And kind of there's this power struggle. So instead, if you just surrender into receiving one person's leadership, and you're able to actually really resource your own energy during that time, then you're fully juiced up for the moment when it's your time to lead. And it's the other partner's opportunity to surrender deeply into that receiving role and turn their decision making off, enjoy being there, enjoy the other person's leadership, allow them to be fully resourced. And in this way, you can utilize energy within a dyad, within a two-person relationship, to strengthen what you can both accomplish together.
Yeah.
Versus we're both sort of struggling and it's making everything harder to do because we're having these little fights, these little struggles about it.
Right, right. I love this depiction because it's very much showing how polarity is dynamic. It's not one person always has this role and the other person always has this role. It's allowing for this to breathe and to change depending on the nature of the situation and the people with the right qualities or positions to handle that.
Exactly. And the polarity is a really interesting piece. And so I think one of the elements of mastery for a committed relationship is really tuning into that flow. And when we think about, the polarity, we can get into a conversation about masculine, feminine, which sometimes can get into a relationship about gender. But really what this is about is energy exchange and reciprocity. So when we get into a conversation with someone, the most satisfying conversations are usually not where one person's leading and the other person's, just sitting there listening, receiving the whole time. The most stimulating conversations usually are a back and forth.
Yeah.
One person's leading, then the other person's leading, and the other person's leading. And that's how I like to think about a way to do relationship that is separate from some of the more standard conversations around polarity, right? It's really, I think about it more around just energetic exchange and what does it mean for the energy to flow as freely as possible in this relationship in a way that feels really stimulating. I think of sexual chemistry as energy flow.
Yeah.
So the more open that flow is back and forth, the more sexual energy, the more sexual attraction we're going to feel.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to s.xlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on S.x Love Psychedelics.